The chandeliers in the Manhattan ballroom threw fractured light across a sea of champagne glasses and designer gowns. Julian Pierce stood at the center, his tailored suit sharp enough to cut, his blue eyes scanning the crowd with practiced disinterest. 32 years old and already a titan? Pierce Properties owned half the New York skyline, and everyone here knew it. "Welcome home, Julian," a voice slithered through the noise. "Damon Cole." Julian turned, forcing a smile. They'd been rivals since business school, but Damon had always been the shadow to Julian's son. Now he stood there with a cryptic grin, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "Good to be back," Julian said, accepting the drink without thinking. "Two old friends," Damon said, raising his glass. Julian sipped. The champagne tasted wrong, bitter beneath the bubbles, but he blamed it on jet lag. The room began to tilt. Faces blurred into watercolor smears. His chest tightened. "You all right, man?" Damon's voice sounded far away, muffled. Julian stumbled toward the exit, his vision tunneling. Someone guided him, hands soft and steady, a floral scent cutting through his fog. A woman. He couldn't see her face clearly, just the curve of her jaw, the warmth of her touch. The hotel suite was a blur of silk sheets and dim light. Her fingers traced his face, and he felt something crack open inside him, something he'd buried beneath years of contracts and cold ambition. She whispered his name, and it sounded like a prayer. When he awoke, harsh morning light stabbed through the curtains. His head pounded. The bed beside him was empty, still warm. No note, no name, just the ghost of her perfume and a feeling he couldn't shake, like he'd lost something he never knew he had. Julian sat up, running his hands through his hair. He'd built his empire on control. Love was a distraction, emotions a liability. But this woman, whoever she was, had crawled under his skin. He grabbed his phone. Missed calls from his assistant, news alerts about the party. But nothing mattered except the ache in his chest that wouldn't fade. "Find her," he muttered to himself. But how do you find a ghost? 5 years ago, Julian had married a woman named Clara Bennett. Not for love, for debt. His grandfather, Walter Pierce, had forced his hand after Clara's father saved Walter's life in a burning car wreck. A life for a marriage. Julian had signed the papers sight unseen, never meeting his bride. Never caring to Clara was a name on a certificate he'd shoved in a drawer. For 5 years, she'd been invisible. He'd lived his life as if she didn't exist. But now, standing in that hotel room with the memory of a stranger's touch burning through him, Julian made a decision. "I want a divorce," called Evelyn Hayes. The best divorce lawyer in New York, sharp, ruthless, unbeatable. If anyone could untangle this mess without dragging him through the mud, it was her. "Mr. Pierce." Her voice came through the phone, smooth and professional. "I can help you with that." They set a meeting for the following week. Julian hung up, feeling lighter. Soon, he'd be free. Free from a marriage that never was. Free to figure out why he couldn't stop thinking about a woman whose face he barely remembered. What he didn't know. What he couldn't possibly guess was that Evelyn Hayes and Clara Bennett were the same person, and the woman from the hotel room. Her to all of them. One woman. One secret. And she was about to walk back into his life. Evelyn Hayes sat in her cramped Brooklyn office, staring at the stack of unpaid bills on her desk. At 30, she'd built a reputation as the lawyer who never lost. But reputation didn't pay for her father's funeral or the debt he'd left behind. The law firm was drowning. She was the only one still swimming. When Julian Pierce's assistant called, offering a fee that could save everything, Evelyn's heart stopped. She was Clara Bennett, the wife he'd never met, the wife he now wanted to erase. Her hands trembled as she accepted the case. She couldn't tell him, not yet. If he knew, he'd think she'd orchestrated that night at the hotel, that she'd trapped him. The truth was messier. She'd been there that night because someone had called, claiming to be Julian's assistant, saying he needed help. She'd found him stumbling, disoriented, stayed to make sure he was safe. The rest happened in a haze she couldn't fully explain. A connection that felt inevitable. Now, sitting across from him in her office, Evelyn barely breathed. Julian Pierce filled the small space like a storm. His suit was impeccable, his jaw set with determination. But his eyes held something else. Something searching. "I want this done quickly," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. "No meetings with Clara. No complications. Can you do that?" Evelyn nodded, her pen scratching across the legal pad. "Of course, Mr. Pierce. I'll handle everything." "Julian," he corrected, leaning back. His gaze lingered on her face. "You look familiar? Have we met?" Her breath caught. "I don't think so. I'd remember. Maybe at a conference," he pressed. "Or a case. Maybe." She forced a smile. New York's a small world. But his eyes didn't leave hers. There was something there, a flicker of recognition he couldn't quite grasp. Evelyn felt her carefully constructed walls cracking. "Your voice," he said slowly. "It's familiar." "I get that a lot," she lied, shuffling papers. "Common voice, I guess." The silence stretched between them, charged and uncomfortable. Then Julian cleared his throat, breaking the spell. "How long will this take?" "A few weeks, if everything goes smoothly," Evelyn said. "I'll contact Clara's legal representation and start the paperwork." "She doesn't have representation," Julian said flatly. "She's been silent for 5 years. I doubt she'll fight this." Evelyn's chest tightened. Silent. That's what he thought of her. Of Clara. A ghost he wanted to forget. "Still," she said carefully, "I'll need to notify her. It's protocol." Julian stood, extending his hand. "Do what you need to do. Just make it fast." When their hands touched, electricity shot through her. His fingers lingered a second too long. She saw something flash in his eyes. Confusion, recognition, desire. He pulled away quickly, clearing his throat. "I'll be in touch." After he left, Evelyn collapsed into her chair, her heart racing. She couldn't keep this secret much longer. But if she told him now, he'd hate her. He'd think she was a liar, a manipulator. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You think you're smart, Evelyn? Or should I call you Clara?" Her blood ran cold. Another text followed. "Julian doesn't know who you are yet, but I do. And I'm going to make sure he finds out the hard way. Enjoy the game while it lasts." The phone slipped from her hand. Someone knew. Someone was watching, and they wanted to destroy her. The headlines hit like a sledgehammer. CEO Julian Pierce spotted with mystery woman. Is Pierce Properties' golden boy hiding secrets? Julian stared at his laptop screen, his jaw clenched. The photo was grainy but damning. Him, stumbling out of the hotel that night, a woman's hand on his arm. Her face was obscured, but the implication was clear. His phone exploded with calls. Investors demanding answers. Board members questioning his judgment. Pierce Properties stock dipped 3% in an hour. He slammed the laptop shut. Who the hell leaked this? His assistant, Marcus, stood in the doorway of his penthouse office, looking pale. "We're trying to trace it." "But Julian, there's more." "More?" "Someone's been feeding information to the press." "About your marriage?" "About Clara Bennett." Julian's blood turned to ice. "What about her?" "They're saying you've been hiding a wife for 5 years. That you married her for money or influence, and then abandoned her. The media's eating it up." Julian stood, pacing like a caged animal. "This is a hit job. Someone's coming after me, but who?" Before Marcus could answer, Julian's phone rang. Evelyn Hayes. "We need to meet," she said, her voice tight. Now, 30 minutes later, Julian stormed into Evelyn's office. She was standing by the window, her arms wrapped around herself. "What's happening?" he demanded. She turned, and he saw fear in her eyes. Real, raw fear. "Someone knows," she whispered. "About me. About Clara. About that night." Julian froze. "What are you talking about?" Evelyn's hands shook as she pulled out her phone, showing him the threatening texts. His face darkened as he read. "Who sent these?" "I don't know," she said. "But Julian, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have said from the beginning." He stepped closer. his presence overwhelming. Then say it. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, the door burst open. Damon Cole walked in, his smile sharp as a knife. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, his voice dripping with false charm. "But I thought Julian should know the truth. Since his lawyer seems to be having trouble finding the words." Julian's eyes narrowed. "Damon, what are you doing here?" "Delivering a message," Damon said, pulling out his phone. He tapped the screen, and a video began to play. It was footage from the hotel. Julian stumbling into the suite, Evelyn helping him, the door closing behind them. "Recognize her, Julian?" Damon asked, his grin widening. "That's Evelyn Hayes, your divorce lawyer. But here's the fun part." He swiped to another image. A marriage certificate. Julian Pierce and Clara Bennett. Next to it, photo ID. Clara Bennett's face stared back at him. It was Evelyn. Julian's world tilted. "No. Yes," Damon said, savoring every word. "Your lawyer is your wife. The woman you want to divorce. The woman you slept with that night. And she's been lying to you this whole time." Julian turned to Evelyn, his face a mask of fury and betrayal. "Is this true?" Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. "Julian, please. Let me explain. Is it true?" "Yes," she whispered. "But it's not what you think." "Not what I think?" His voice was a roar now. "You've been lying to me from the moment I walked into this office. You took my case knowing exactly who you were, and you said nothing. I was protecting you." She shouted back, her voice breaking. "Someone drugged you that night, Julian. Someone set you up. I was trying to figure out who before they destroyed you. Protecting me?" He laughed bitterly. "You were protecting yourself. You wanted to trap me, didn't you? Use that night against me. Make me fall for you so I'd stay married to you and your failing law firm." The words cut deeper than any knife. Evelyn staggered back as if he'd struck her. "That's not true," she whispered. "Isn't it?" Julian's eyes were cold now, empty. "I wanted one thing, freedom, and you couldn't even give me that." Damon leaned against the doorframe, watching the destruction with satisfaction. "Oh, and Julian? I'm the one who drugged you that night. Thought you should know. Consider it payback for every time you beat me. Every deal you stole. Every moment you made me feel small." Julian lunged at him, but Damon was already backing toward the door. "Enjoy the fallout, Pierce," Damon called. "Your empire's about to crumble, and you have no one to blame but yourself." He disappeared, leaving Julian and Evelyn alone in the wreckage. Julian turned to her one last time. "Stay away from me, Clara. Or Evelyn. Whoever the hell you are, we're done." He walked out, slamming the door behind him. Evelyn collapsed to her knees, her sobs tearing through the empty office. She'd lost him, and the worst part, she'd never really had him at all. The Pierce Properties board meeting was a bloodbath. Julian sat at the head of the table, his face carved from stone as investor after investor demanded answers. The media storm had evolved into a hurricane. Stock prices plummeted. Partnerships dissolved overnight. And at the center of it all was Julian Pierce, the CEO who'd built an empire on control and was now watching it crumble. "We need damage control," Richard Stern, the lead investor, said, "and we need it now. This scandal with your secret wife has become a liability." "She's not a secret," Julian said through gritted teeth. "It was an arrangement. One I'm ending." "Too little too late?" another board member chimed in. "The public thinks you're a fraud. A hypocrite who preaches transparency while hiding a marriage." Julian's jaw tightened. "I'll fix this." "How?" Stern leaned forward. "Because from where we're sitting, you're one headline away from a vote of no confidence." The words hung in the air like a threat. That evening, Julian stood alone in his penthouse, staring at the city lights below. Manhattan glittered like broken glass. His phone buzzed incessantly, but he ignored it. All except one call. "Marcus, you need to see this," his assistant said. His voice urgent, Julian opened the email Marcus sent. It was a detailed report, meticulously compiled. Evidence of Damon Cole's conspiracy. Text messages. Financial records. Proof that Damon had orchestrated everything from the drugging to the media leaks. and at the bottom, a note. This was compiled by Evelyn Hayes. She's been investigating Damon since the night of the party. She knew something was wrong. She was protecting you. Julian's hand shook. He'd called her a liar, accused her of manipulation, but she'd been trying to save him all along. His phone rang. "Evelyn," he answered without thinking. "Why?" Her voice was soft, broken. "Because I loved you. Even when you didn't know I existed, even when you wanted to erase me. I loved you, Julian. And I couldn't let someone destroy you. You should have told me." "I know," she whispered. "But if I had, would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was the one setting you up?" Silence. "I'm dropping the divorce case," she continued, "and I'm leaving New York. I've already started packing. You'll be free, Julian. Just like you wanted. Damon can't hurt you anymore with this evidence. Your reputation will recover. Pierce Properties will survive." "Evelyn, wait." "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to tell you the truth. I'm sorry I let you walk into that meeting blind. But most of all, I'm sorry I made you feel trapped." The line went dead. Julian stared at the phone, his chest hollow. She was leaving, sacrificing herself. Her career, her life in New York, everything she'd fought to build, all to protect him. He grabbed his keys and ran. The Brooklyn streets were slick with rain when he reached her building. He took the stairs 2 at a time, his heart pounding. Her door was ajar, boxes stacked in the hallway. Evelyn. She appeared in the doorway, her eyes red from crying. "You shouldn't be here." "I know," he said, breathless. "But I am. And you need to hear this." He stepped closer, rain dripping from his hair. "I was wrong. About you. About us. I spent 5 years running from anything that felt real because I was terrified of losing control. But that night when I was with you, I felt something I'd never felt before. And it scared the hell out of me, Julian," she whispered. "Let me finish," he said, his voice rough. "You've been Clara this whole time, my wife. The woman I dismissed like she meant nothing. But you mean everything. You fought for me when I gave you every reason not to. You investigated Damon. You protected me. And I repaid you by calling you a liar." Tears streamed down her face. "I did lie. I kept my identity from you." "Because you were scared," he said, cupping her face. "Because you thought I'd hate you? And maybe I would have. But I don't. I can't. Because somewhere along the way, I fell for you, Evelyn. For Clara, for whoever you are. I fell for the woman who wouldn't let me drown." "You wanted a divorce," she said, her voice breaking. "I wanted freedom," he corrected. "But freedom without you feels like a prison." He kissed her then, desperate and raw. She melted into him, her hands gripping his shirt like a lifeline. When they pulled apart, she looked up at him with hope and fear warring in her eyes. "What do we do now?" "We fight," he said. "Together. We take down Damon. We rebuild. And we figure out what this is between us. No more secrets. No more running." She nodded, a small smile breaking through her tears. But as they stood there, wrapped in each other, Julian's phone buzzed. "A message from an unknown number. You think you've won? This is just the beginning. Check the news." Julian's blood turned cold. He pulled up the news app, and his world shattered. Breaking. Evidence suggests Evelyn Hayes fabricated documents to frame business rival. Is Pierce's wife a criminal? Evelyn stared at the screen, her face pale. "No, I didn't, Julian, I swear." "I know," he said, pulling her close. "But Damon's not done with us yet." The war was far from over. The courtroom hummed with tension. Reporters lined the walls. Cameras flashed. Evelyn sat at the defendant's table, her hands folded, her spine straight. Across the aisle, Damon Cole smirked, his lawyer whispering in his ear. Julian sat behind Evelyn, his presence a solid weight at her back. The charges were damning. Fabrication of evidence. Fraud. Conspiracy. Damon's team had constructed a perfect trap, twisting every document Evelyn had compiled into proof of her guilt, rather than his. But they'd made one mistake. They'd underestimated Julian Pierce. "Your Honor," Julian's lawyer. The best money could buy, stood. I'd like to call a witness. Julian Pierce. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Julian walked to the stand, his eyes never leaving Evelyn's. Mr. Pierce, the lawyer began, you hired Miss Hayes to handle your divorce. Is that correct? Yes. And during that time, did you know she was Clara Bennett? Your legal wife? No, Julian said. Not at first. When you discovered the truth, how did you react? Julian's jaw tightened. I was angry. I felt betrayed. But I was wrong. The courtroom went silent. Wrong how? The lawyer pressed. Clara kept her identity secret because she was protecting me, Julian said, his voice steady. Someone drugged me at a party. Someone orchestrated a campaign to destroy my reputation and my company. Evelyn investigated while I was blind to the danger. She compiled evidence against Damon Cole, evidence that's now being used to frame her. He turned to the judge. The documents Ms. Hayes gathered are authentic. Every text message, every financial record, every piece of evidence points to Damon Cole as the architect of this entire conspiracy. He drugged me. He leaked stories to the press. And now he's trying to destroy the one person who stood in his way? That's a lie. Damon shouted, standing. She's manipulating him. Just like she manipulated everyone else. Sit down, Mr. Cole, the judge ordered. Julian's lawyer produced a tablet. Your Honor, I have surveillance footage from the night of the party. It shows Mr. Cole slipping something into Mr. Pierce's drink. We also have phone records linking Mr. Cole to the journalists who published the slanderous articles. And finally, we have testimony from an IT specialist who traced the fabricated evidence back to Mr. Cole's personal computer. The courtroom erupted. Damon's face went white. His lawyer scrambled, objecting, but the damage was done. The judge banged her gavel. Order. Mr. Cole, you'll remain for questioning. Ms. Hayes, all charges against you are dismissed. Evelyn's breath left her in a rush. Julian was at her side in seconds, pulling her into his arms. It's over, he whispered. It's finally over. But Damon wasn't finished. As officers approached him, he turned to Julian, his eyes wild. You think you've won? He spat. You took everything from me. Every opportunity, every success. You made me nothing. No, Julian said calmly. You did that to yourself. I just refused to lose. Damon lunged, but officers restrained him, dragging him away as he shouted curses. Outside the courthouse, rain poured from a gray sky. Evelyn and Julian stood under an awning, watching the city blur through the downpour. What now? She asked quietly. Julian turned to her, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Now we start over? No more secrets. No more running? You still want this? She asked, searching his face. A wife you never asked for? A marriage that started as a debt? I want you, he said. Not because I owe you. Not because we're legally bound. But because when I look at you, I see the only person who ever fought for me when I didn't deserve it. Tears mixed with rain on her cheeks. I've loved you since I was a girl, Julian. When my father told me stories about the brilliant, driven man he admired, but I never thought you'd love me back. I didn't think I could love anyone, he admitted. But you proved me wrong. He kissed her, slow and deep, as the rain washed away the ashes of their past. Months later, Pierce Properties stood taller than ever. Julian restructured, brought in new investors, and rebuilt the empire from its foundation. Evelyn reopened her father's law firm. It's now thriving with cases and a team she trusted. But the biggest change was them. They remarried. It's not out of obligation, but choice. A small ceremony on the rooftop of Julian's building, Manhattan glittering below like a promise. As they danced under string lights, Evelyn looked up at him. Do you ever think about that night? The party. Every day, Julian said. It brought me to you, even though it started with poison. He smiled. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best destinations. She rested her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. I'm glad I found you, Julian Pierce. I'm glad you never gave up on me. Clara Bennett. They swayed in the night. to scarred souls who'd found their way through betrayal, sacrifice, and impossible odds in the end. Love hadn't been the distraction Julian feared. It had been the salvation neither of them knew they needed. The end.